Well, hey there, everyone. This is Brian M. Truskowski with Illuminate. This is the Illuminated Conversations podcast. I need to put a little preview before I go into the podcast because I forgot to give the intro. Here it is. The intro is this podcast is about having illuminated conversations about mental health, spiritual health, physical, emotional, mental well-being in this post-COVID crazy world. What the heck do we do for our own health and sanity before, so we don't have to go to typical allopathic doctor means. And so this whole podcast series is about me interviewing lovely practitioners all over this country who have many ways that they introduce alternative or holistic ways of healing that aren't the traditional ways. So with that, please listen, please like and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, we're going to check out Gloria Zimet. On to the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Illuminated Conversations podcast. I am your host, Brian M. Truskowski with Illuminate. Today, I have with us Gloria Zimet. She does reflexology and does a bunch of other healing arts, which are just amazing, and she'll get to tell you about that soon. I just want to say thank you for being on the show, Gloria. I'm excited to have you. And just as a note for the people who are watching, we got connected through my lovely friend, Steve. And if you haven't seen any shows with Steve McLean, make sure I'll put some links up here to our conversation with Steve. But either way, Gloria, please, thank you for being on the show and tell people about why you're here and what you want to share with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you inviting me to share the work that I do with your listeners. And especially, I appreciate how you're using your platform to educate your listeners about different holistic modalities that they may not have heard about before and most likely are not hearing about from a primary care doctor. So, very grateful for this opportunity. So, about me and my background, I developed and have been practicing a unique form of the traditional foot massage that I've called reflexology. And it blends Reiki with the traditional foot massage that's called reflexology. So, the premise of reflexology is that our feet reflect what's happening in our body in a very specific way. And I'd like to show an image, so I'll unblur my screen for a moment so that you can see that. So to show just very beautifully and graphically how reflexology postulates that all of our organs, glands, and body parts are located in the feet. So you can kind of imagine from this that if you had a shoulder disorder, this would be the area of the foot that we would massage, with the premise being that the massage stimulates nerve endings in this area of the foot that relays a signal to the body part, helping it relax and free itself from tension and pain. And in a similar way, you can see the rib cage here. So if someone were coming in with a respiratory disorder like asthma, we would work with this part of the foot, with the same idea being that that massage could help relay messages to the lungs and to the trachea to help those parts relax. And when that happens, what people typically report, and I'm going to blur, is that their breathing improves. So we have this pretty much within a session opportunity to experience improvement in ailments that we may have thought that we couldn't get any kind of relief from other than from traditional pharmaceuticals. So it's really welcome for people who have had adverse reactions to pharmaceuticals, didn't respond to them right from the get-go, or prefer a holistic approach to healing. So reflexology is one of many modalities that offers this to people. And sadly, is one that you would not hear about from your primary care doctors for the most part. Most of our health insurance do not cover the cost of a reflexology treatment yet. And I say yet because I'm really hopeful that that will change. And there are signs that it is changing. But until that point, I think it's important for people to know that there are practitioners out there and modalities that can address problems that they've been having.
And I think I just want to insert, I think it's
Yeah,
interesting,
please.
like the few times as me being a body worker where I've been working on, I remember I was like a year in doing chair massage, and I already
Mm-hmm.
learned reflexology in massage school. And
Mm-hmm.
someone was working on the chair, she goes, "My feet are getting really hot right now."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Really? Where are your feet getting hot?" And she pointed right at the sort of the transverse arch, the cross point, right? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, that's fascinating. It's a reflex point from this point. It's just going backwards." And she looked at me like I was crazy, and I was explaining reflexology to her, and she's like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's insane." And so, like, it can even go backwards sometimes. I've found,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Oh,
which is,
absolutely.
yeah, or
Yeah.
backwards meaning it's just proving the connection between
Mm-hmm.
those 2 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that example in. I think oftentimes it's hard for people to imagine that our feet do anything more than bear our body weight.
Right.
So this whole notion that they're really this kind of like built-in toolbox where through self-massage, because you can access the same points yourself, not nearly as enjoyable as receiving it, that we have this opportunity for to work with, our lungs in the asthma example, or have someone else work with that, and that's a way of healing, and that it really underscores the notion that our bodies are designed to self heal or to heal themselves, and that we can tap into it. So I find that incredibly empowering, and my clients do as well. So I like to teach them how they can massage the different areas of their feet to continue the benefit that they receive in sessions.
So I have a question for you. I know some people who do reflexology use tools or implements. Do you use that, or
Mm-hmm.
do you just use your hands, or how does that look practically?
So at this point, I use just my hands. Every rare once in a while, I might introduce a tuning fork, which kind of takes us into the realm that you were mentioning, at the beginning of the podcast, that I have studied a number of other healing modalities, and one of them is the use of tuning forks. And I'm quite fascinated how vibration applied to the same areas of the feet that correspond with the different body parts
Hmm.
can accelerate the healing in a
Absolutely.
gentle way, but primarily, in answer to your question, it's my hands.
Nice. Yeah, tuning forks are fun. I've used them in different intuitive ways over the years, and I know there's a whole thing growing with just tuning forks, but I love that you're working with that and using the vibrations, the
Mm-hmm.
sonic vibrations through that. That's a fun way of doing that. I like that.
Yeah. So it's definitely beneficial to do, and it kind of points to just how much we can integrate a number of different other modalities into our practice. And over the years, I have studied a number of different healing modalities, which I do integrate. Tuning forks, and that vibration being one of them, working with limiting subconscious beliefs being another one. And that combined with the reflexology really forms, I would say, the majority of my practice. People have found the greatest benefit by looking at what the actual source of the tension that they're carrying is, which is often in a belief that is in our blind spot, meaning that it's in our subconscious,
Yeah.
usually something that was imprinted when we were very, very young, but
Yeah.
can be changed no matter how many decades have passed. So
There's a
that
saying that I've heard is you don't know what you don't know, right? And
mm-hmm,
it's a large percentage of our psyche falls on the you don't know what you don't know, and that's what you're talking
mm-hmm,
about, subconscious or even pre-verbal
yes,
experiences. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly concur with that. I would like to share with your listeners, because I think it's relevant to this idea of how can we as a public, as society, find out about these healing modalities that are off the beaten path. And I became introduced to reflexology over 30 years ago when my son was diagnosed with asthma. He was 3 years old.
Mm.
And I was told by his pediatrician that because he developed it at such a late age, he would never outgrow it. And as a new mother, I found that hard to believe, but I also was pretty vulnerable with a child that had asthma and accepted that as the truth until one fateful day when I just threw my arms up in the air and I said, there's got to be another way, which didn't make sense logically because I was trained at the University of Michigan in a very conventional medical um, um, subject matter called medical technology, kind of like it was meant to be a stepping stone to nurse practitioner, public health, medical school. So you can imagine what we were learning. And it was very antithetical to there is any other way except what we learned. But it was within weeks of that frustration that there's got to be another way that a pamphlet showed up in my mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
And it was talking about a technique that I had never heard about called reflexology. And it mentioned 10 disorders that reflexology was incredibly effective at alleviating or curing. And one of them was asthma. And my antenna shot up. And turned out that this reflexologist lived a 10-minute walk from where I was, which was equally incredible. And I went, took my son. He didn't have us fill out a medical history form. And he said, it looks like your son has asthma, even though he was showing no symptoms in his body, nothing in his breathing at the time, but it was all reflected in his feet. And I was so intrigued that there was a way of addressing his disease that was gentle, that was a non-pharmaceutical, because the drugs that he was taking were causing him to have the ADD, and he was a very easygoing little boy. So, I mean, it was a major behavioral change. And with the reflexology, I got a sense that I could offer this to him like CPR. And it would make sense, especially because asthma runs in the family. That was my thinking or my understanding at the time, that it would be useful to have this, to be able to offer it in case he were to have an asthma attack, and even to be able to offer him this preventatively.
And so I just want to point out, and I just want to clarify something for those listening, but also for myself. You work the top or the dorsal, so the dorsal as well as the ventral side of the foot, right? The bottom and the top of the foot, right?
Correct.
And my understanding is that it's the top of the foot is more reflective of the ribs than the bottom of the foot, then, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So you'd be working more for the asthma, you'd be working more the top of the foot to kind of help release stuff.
Actually both.
Okay.
So the top of the foot that has, that reflects the rib cage, there are muscles that are accessory muscles to breathing called intercostal muscles. So when you are having difficulty breathing, those muscles become overworked. So working those muscles helps relax them, working with the diaphragm, working with the lungs, which are on the sole of the foot. And the trachea would be areas that we would work with, and that I was observing as the reflexologist was working with my son, that that's what he was doing. So I ended up learning reflexology from him, really with the intention of having it as a tool like CPR. never imagining ever that I was going to become a reflexologist. But in my training, I loved the massage and people's reaction to it so much that I made a career change. And
That's
that was 30 years ago. But the interesting thing is that had it not been for that pamphlet, I'm not quite sure what my life would look like today. And I'm not quite sure that my son would have ever outgrown his asthma, something that his pediatrician never acknowledged
that's
when I told
crazy.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. I mean, I always have a disdain when I hear any doctors give definitive, like absolute statements about
Mm-hmm.
anyone's health. And I always love the victory stories like yours, Gloria, about you and your son. You're like, no, I'm not one to settle with that. Like I gotta find out something else. And I just want to honor you and just like say thank you for just not as a mother, I'm sure, like I'm not a mother, obviously, but like as a mother, I can only imagine the heartache and the pain of like, wow, my child is suffering and there's nothing I can do about it. And you want to find that something. So
Mm.
it's beautiful. And I call it divine providence or whatever you want to call it. But the fact that it all showed up and worked out, putting you where you are right now is that's such a beautiful story. And then you get to
Mm-hmm.
share that with others, right? You know,
And I get to share that through you, and this is the modern day version of the pamphlet
right.
that showed up in my mailbox, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, initially when I learned this, I was pretty evangelical about it because I thought everyone needs to know this. We're not finding out about it. If it weren't for that pamphlet, I wouldn't know. So, doesn't everyone want to know this?
Yeah.
Look at how many people have asthma in this particular case.
And just for the viewers, hold up the other, so it does more than just asthma. I mean, low back stuff, any organs issues, the whole body is reflected. Hold the other one up with the organs on it, Gloria. I think you have
Yeah.
another one, right?
Yeah. One moment. Let me just get the.
Take the blur off. Yeah, and so the whole body is reflected, and there's that one. Yeah, the whole
This one.
body's mirrored there, and then flip it over too, and you can kind of see this, but you get the organs in there, you get it all reflected in there, and so it's really mapped out beautifully. And I think there's many different modalities. I mean, Chinese and Indian, and there's other places that mapped it out, and I love that they've done the hard work for us, right? To like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is here and that's there, and we just get to go, oh, and then you as a practitioner intuitively tune in with that and go, okay, and working with your clients with that. So
Yeah, so that does form the underpinning of reflexology. How, as a reflexologist, I would work if someone was coming in. The idea being, no matter what their physical ailment is, there's a place on the foot that corresponds with that body part that we can massage, and then that massage sends nerve signals to that body part, whatever it is, to help it relax and restore function.
yeah, the human
Yeah,
body is really amazing. It really
it's incredible.
it really is.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I have the really the privilege and the blessing to, to be working with people and open their eyes to, the amazing ways, additional amazing ways that our human body works and can heal.
It is, and I'll just add this, and then there's something else that you want to talk about on this episode. But I will say, I one time, and this was unique maybe for me, but I had a female client who came who had some shoulder issues, but she didn't like her shoulders being touched. So I said, well, that's fine. I can work on your hands and your feet. And she looked at me like I was nuts. But by the end of the session, she's like, wow, my shoulders feel better. And she was like,
Mm-hmm.
just blown away, right, by this. And so I think just having these conversations with people, and I love that we're going deeper into this, like even with asthma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how it's just like this, like you said, it's sort of antithetical to most people's belief that how are you going to help me feel better by touching my feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't have any semblance.
Yeah.
And so
Well, here's an interesting anecdote that just happened a few days ago. One of my clients has been um, massaging her daughter's feet. She took a workshop with me, and her daughter is so interested that her daughter wants to learn reflexology. Her daughter is 13 years old.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think in this way, kind of slowly, we're beginning to impact, the younger generations. I mean, really young. And, hopefully this will become part of the mainstream.
Well, and I'll say this last thing, and I think it beautifully dovetails into this next thing we're doing with the affirmations, is I'm frustrated on the fact that what you and I do is considered alternative medicine when it's been around for antiquity, like from the beginning of time for thousands of years, especially Chinese medicine and and Ayurveda, right? And modern medicine has only been around for like a few hundred years, right? 1800s is maybe when the Rockefellers and right and all this with penicillin. So just I've always, and there's whole political thing behind that, which we won't get into, but just it always has a nerve with me, like this stuff that's been around forever is considered alternative and sort of swept under the rug, but it has far, in my judgment, more potency, right? Than
Absolutely. And if I could add to it, because
please, yeah.
like almost like don't get me started on this topic.
Yes.
But this is one where I feel like our words convey so much energy behind them. So I've stopped using the word alternative and I now use exclusively holistic.
Love it.
And it really is a holistic model that recognizes the body is capable of healing. And if we are able to gently remove the blocks from it, it can do its job properly. But to the word alternative, it basically feeds a divisiveness, because you have to say, like, what is this, alternative to? And then you get back into the loop of the modern medicine that you mentioned, and that's actually the newer one. But holistic, like, it's its own entity. We don't have to compare it to anything. So I feel this ease come over my body, just being able to even express that,
Yeah.
To you and to a larger, viewing audience.
And what I'll say is, we said this offline before, and it's potent to be said, is a lot of people in the holistic field have studied multiple modalities and they integrate them together, like you were mentioning, right? Mixing, energy work with reflexology and then all these other things. Whereas I judge in the modern medicine, right? It's like they are so boxed in, and I study only the heart, or I study only the liver, or only the cardio, whatever, right? They're living in these boxes, these compartmentalized boxes. It's like, oh, well, the transmission failed. All right, switch it out. It'll be fine. Why did it break? Oh, it doesn't matter, right? It's just like, well, why did that transmission fail, right? It's just like we've made them our bodies into cars, right? It's just like, oh, just switch it out, no big deal, right? So, yeah. Anyway, yes, soapbox over. Let's just we can have a whole conversation on that alone, I'm sure.
Yeah. So what I thought could be really valuable is to introduce you and your viewing audience to a very effective form of affirmation that is another modality that I integrate into my work. This one can be very effective standalone, so it's not something that you have to come to a bodywork practice to do, and that's why I thought it could be helpful, so that people who are listening can kind of like explore this along with you, write down the particular statement, and use it after the podcast is aired for their benefit and their family's benefit. So if you're open to this, Brian, I would love to be able to work with you as a way of modeling this.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to do is actually, I'll in the post edit, I'll put the affirmation on the screen so that people can see it.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of background about this statement. It's called the Matrix statement, and it will look like a regular affirmation statement to most people who have done affirmations, but it has a little bit more oomph to it and a little bit more effectiveness as a result of that. So we've been taught that if we're feeling a certain way, so if today I'm feeling angry, that I'm feeling angry entirely because of my particular circumstances. And the matrix philosophy teaches us something radically different. And that postulates that most of what I'm feeling when I'm angry is actually not mine. So really take a moment to think about that, because it's so different from what we've been taught. And what's important to understand is the reason behind that. And all of the reasoning goes like this, that all of our thoughts and feelings carry with them unique vibrations. So that when I'm feeling angry or upset or stressed or overwhelmed, whatever that might be, then I am automatically, even if I'm not aware of it, emitting those vibrations or frequencies out into the world. And I'm also collecting around my body's electromagnetic field all of the different vibrations and frequencies that are being emitted by every other human being that I share the planet with. And that's happening for all of us, even though we may not have been taught this. So this matrix statement gives us a chance to evaluate whether or not these energies that have clung to our body's electromagnetic field, that are invisible, so we don't see them, and they've been happening since the beginning of our lives, and we're so used to them that it doesn't feel like all of a sudden a heavy weight. So the statement will give us a chance to notice whether or not we feel any kind of a shift from having said this statement. Meaning that, is it true that I've been carrying, this global load of anger in this example, in addition to my own? Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to everyone listening, but for those who don't make sense, just keep listening and watch what happens for those who are watching, and maybe even try it yourself as I'm doing it, just to have the experience with it. Yeah.
So before I share the statement with you, what I invite you to do is take a scan of your body and notice what stands out in your physical body. If there's any areas that feel tight or contracted, painful.
Yeah, I will say, it's actually the emotion showed up before the physical symptom showed up, but sadness is really almost on an unconscious level, but I'm aware of it because I've been doing some work around it recently. But as a result, I kind of felt it right across the top of my chest, so it's like, oh, okay, there we go. So, which I do know connect, grief and lungs, right?
Beautiful. So, note that, so that you can compare this feeling now, which we'll call your baseline, to how you feel afterwards. So in a way, the sadness might address the next part of the three-pronged: physical body, mood, which could be an emotion, the sadness, but it also could be, a mood or a state of mind. And also notice how you're breathing without trying to change it. So just kind of like a little, like if this could be a photographic snapshot, this is how I'm feeling now, pre-matrix statement, and then we'll compare how you're feeling after.
Okay.
So the statement goes like this: I choose to disconnect from the matrix of, and you'll fill in the blank, a particular emotion or feeling that's weighing heavily on you that surrounds the planet. So you mentioned sadness, and that's certainly one you could work with. It could also be anything else that feels more pertinent for right now.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that one. So, okay.
So then if you can, I'll have you repeat that matrix statement aloud, maybe like 5 or 6 times, and then I'll check in with you how you're feeling.
Okay. So I choose to disconnect from the matrix. Hang on. Choose to connect from the matrix. Okay. I choose to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. I choose to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. I choose to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. I choose to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. I choose to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. It's interesting. I feel an energy there. It's like a buzzing, this sort of energy. It doesn't feel, it felt static like this, just rigid before. Now it feels like it's breathing or moving.
Yeah, I get that sense. I get that sense from how your hands are trying to put into words something that may be difficult.
Yeah, it's
to
a visual
put into words. Yeah.
And I will say it seems like the baseline breath seems like it's a little bit more full than it was pre.
Okay. So based on
so
what
yeah.
you're sharing and what I'm also seeing as I'm watching you say the statements, I'd like to invite you to add a word to that statement that's not part of what we just spoke about and maybe what's written yet. And that's the word deserve. So I choose and deserve to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet.
Interesting. So I choose to, I deserve to, and was it, say it again, I choose to and deserve to.
Correct.
So I choose to and deserve to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. I choose to and deserve to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. Interesting. I choose to and deserve to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that encompasses the planet. I choose to and deserve to disconnect from the matrix of sadness that surrounds the planet. Wow, I'm already feeling like that was significant. Even after the first time I said it, I felt like there's just way more space happening there. Like it's just, it's it's just expanding outwards and dissipating within that. That's really fascinating.
And what I find is that oftentimes when I would introduce the matrix statement to people with the word deserve, there'd be a kind of resistance to saying it because there's so many of us who have been raised with a sense of, you don't deserve this. And like, who do you think you are? Kind of like, even if it's not conscious, as an adult, it may be an old message that when they see the word deserve, it's like they almost shut down. So I found it much more valuable to begin the matrix by saying simply, I choose to disconnect. And then as I get a sense of how things are progressing, just like in this case, to introduce deserve and see what happens. And what you shared is pretty common. It's extraordinary what it adds.
Well, what I feel like for me, especially in this day and age, the word deserve has this air of privilege to it, right? In a sense. And so like, yeah, like you said, who are you to think that you deserve this, right? Insert whatever subject. And so, yeah, it's interesting. So I think I did have that a little bit, but I walked through it and said, okay, I'm going to choose it to walk through that. That was what went through my head. I'm like, no, okay, I see that block. I'm going to just keep walking. And yeah, because we as humans, and we should start wrapping at this point, but we as humans we're so good at playing small, right? and not wanting to reach out. And you're an exemplar of that. Like, no, I don't want to play small, and I don't want to just say, except with my doctor or pediatrician told me about my son, right? I'm going to choose to, and I deserve to expand this out, right? And look what it's turned into. Now you're sharing this with the world, and thank you. This is great, and I'm hoping everyone listening is trying this on, or will try it on afterwards. But yeah, this is really great, and I love how you integrate this in with your sessions, because I think the more we can integrate and support our clients on multiple levels, the more benefit that we are to them, right?
Wow.
So
this is a taste of how almost magical that, this statement is. I personally find it more effective and reliable than affirmations when I've used them. It really speaks to the fact that we are enmeshed in an energetic matrix as human beings. And we didn't know that we were picking up on so much negativity or even contributing to the negativity in the world. And now we have a way of modulating that. So I often liken it to unsubscribing. It's kind of like this is like the unsubscribe feature. It's like, I don't want
nice.
to be getting any more of this. I'm aware that it's still out there, but I have a way to empower myself to disconnect or to unsubscribe.
Well, and that's
And
beautiful. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and this can apply to, I mean, you did it elegantly for sadness that you shared with us. And imagine, the long list of life depleting emotions that we all feel. So if you think about that, most of what we're feeling isn't ours. It's quite astonishing because we've been taught that it is mine. I'm sad because, and fill in the blank, that's your circumstance. And that's, ironclad. And then this all of a sudden like blows that up into, no, it's actually not because of that. And it's not just your sadness, it's that whole list. So you could use this statement, and I don't know, was it like 2 minutes tops that it took you to go through that? 3 minutes? To be able to start to progressively like rid ourselves of what we weren't even aware of that we were carrying, walking through the world with this heaviness and denseness around us. So I love it because it's empowering and it's incredibly effective.
Yeah, and what I would add to is do this in a time and space that you have time to sit with it afterwards, because I'm still sensing it moving. It's even coming up into my throat now and expanding out. So integrate it into a meditation, but don't do it when you're like in the middle of things and like have to rush, because just I feel like it'd be better if you gave yourself space around that to be able to integrate that and feel it and sense it shifting.
And I appreciate you suggesting that. And what I would add to that is to almost like explore, what is it like when I have space? And what is it like if I don't have space? So that we get into we can say, like, in my experience, it works better when, but it's coming right from your experience. So that may be true for most people. But I could also imagine that kind of like in a pinch in a work environment where something gets triggered, you don't have that kind of spaciousness to sit with it, but you need some antidote to what's happening. So I offer that, kind of like in that context.
Beautiful. I love the both and with that, not the either or. Yeah, absolutely. Because what works for me may not work for someone else, right? So we always are open to that.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Nice.
for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we start to wrap, so do you want to give the listeners do you want to share your information, or how people may get a hold of you if they wanted to have more information about you, website or anything like that?
Certainly, my website is a little bit complicated to remember. It's reflexology.com. I imagine that you might put that on
I can put that on the
the
screen.
course notes, yeah, or the podcast notes.
Yeah.
And feel free to get in touch if you would like to explore reflexology together, if you're interested in doing matrix work like this, the matrix statement, I can facilitate a session remotely on Zoom like this. For reflexology, that is something that we would do in person.
And where are you located for people listening if they don't know that?
And I'm located in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay, great. Awesome. Any other closing thoughts or things that you want to share that maybe haven't yet before we wrap?
I guess I would like to reiterate my gratitude to you, Brian, for what you are doing to be a mouthpiece for those of us who, really need this kind of a platform to get the messages out, and for people, however they find out about podcasts like this, that may have an aha listening to any one of your guests. So for me, this has really been an honor, and I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you. I'm appreciating you being on here and sharing your time, your wisdom, and all of that with us. So thank you, Gloria. And thank you everyone for listening, and stay tuned for the next one. As Steve McLean lovely says, make sure to like and subscribe, even though I never like and subscribe to any of my shows that I listen to. I will never stop laughing about him when he says that. But anyway, thank you all for listening. I love all of you. Be well, make a beautiful and blessed day, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.